Once you know where the antennas are to be positioned, you also know the length of the feeder cables required between the antennas and the radio equipment. So let us cut and prepare some feeder cables. Feeder cables are supplied on wooden drums, and these need to be treated with care. You cannot jolt them around or even store them on their side without risking damage to the cable. The cable drum is lifted up on cable drum jacks so that the drum will rotate freely. Our cable drum is relatively small, but you may encounter much larger drums. Some cable drums may be a couple of meters in diameter and require lifting equipment to lower them into position from a lorry. You can't just put your foot under one of these drums to stop it rolling. Because cable drums are so heavy, the lifting jacks must use some form of mechanical lifting device. Ours uses a small hydraulic jack to raise the cable drum off the floor. You must pull the required length of feeder cable from the top of the drum. If the cable is pulled from beneath, then there is always the risk of damaging the cable that drags on the floor immediately under the drum. Pull the cable out straight. Do not bend the cable. This type of cable may only be bent a limited number of times before damage occurs. The cable can be laid on the ground, but be very careful not to damage the outer insulation. We do not need the tape measure anymore, since the first cable can now be used as a reference to determine the length of the other feeder cables. Cut the cable to the required length. This can be done with a hacksaw, but if the inner core is hollow, then try to hold it so that debris from the saw does not travel down inside the cable. A little tip here is that the Andrews tool for preparing the cable ends for a connector also be used to cut the cable without generating debris. But if you have to use a saw, then form the cable in a gentle loop and cut the bottom of the loop. Tap out any debris that may have entered the inner conductor. Tape the end of the cable on the drum to prevent moisture entering the end of the cable. Draw out and cut to length the other feeder cables that are needed for the installation. You only need to tape one end of each feeder if you are going to fit connectors now. The Andrews positive stop connector is quick and easy to fit. Full instructions are given in the leaflet accompanying the connector. You basically cut away 38 mm of outer insulation and then use the cable preparation tool to cut the feeder cleanly. Trim away the pre-cut cable outer insulation and then pass the connector shell over the end of the cable. Put the spring ring over the end of the cable. Fit the connector body and tighten it using 2 spanners or wrenches. Rotate the shell, not the connector. At this stage, you could apply a temporary cable identification label. We are going to use a sleeve to grip the feeder cable. This sleeve is supplied by Andrews and is simply squashed to expand it, and then it is pushed over the end of the feeder. The bottom of the sleeve is secured with a compression clip. The clip is placed around the end of the sleeve and then compressed to lightly grip the feeder cable. A rope can now be safely attached to the sleeve without damaging the cable. Be sure to leave sufficient cable protruding through the sleeve to allow jumper cables to be connected.